Hey friends, I'm Daniel Nesbitt, and in this episode, we're going to tackle a few more letters. If you've been following along, in the last video, I kind of went through pretty quickly and just started putting together some more uppercase letters. We also really spent a bit of time on the capital M and N, just making sure that how the diagonal strokes lined up with the vertical and horizontal strokes were working out the way that they should. For the lowercase, I did go in and make a small adjustment, deciding that I wanted the lowercase letters just to be a tad bit narrower. So that's where we're at. For this one, I was going to jump in because I realized in the last episode I was probably missing one of the simplest characters to do. And if anybody called me out on this, then bravo, because I probably had that one coming. But the lowercase q. We can do something with that. And as you probably guessed, it doesn't need to be anything super crazy. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to create a simple shape here. And I think we're just going to do a skew that looks somewhat okay. And I'm just kind of making this one up as I go. But my plan is, or my thought anyway, is that this will look halfway decent. So we'll just kind of jump in there, throw it off to the side. And I think I could be sort of okay with this. So with the Q, there are many ways to interpret this tail. And I've seen some really good ones, and I've seen some really simple ones. My thought right now is that I might be incorporating some more character into other areas of the font. And I don't necessarily think that I need to have this be super showy. It just needs to be enough for you to think that it's a Q. And that's about all we need to do. So there we go. That looks like a Q, right? I hope so. All right. So really the main thing in this episode I wanted to jump into was some of the more circular shapes. And I think since I did the uppercase last time, I may jump back to the lowercase for no reason other than it's the lowercase. So one of the cool things about lowercase is you can actually gain a lot of information, or you can actually create a lot of work from the B, the D, the P, and the Q. And so that's where I'm going to start today. Jump back here. And for this, we're just going to grab a couple of elements. But to start, I'm going to put everything in place here. So I'm not going to need that chunk of this. I'm going to need that chunk. And really all I'm using this other stem for here is just a way to determine the width that I'm going for. And I just noticed, did not grab my whole O there. But at some point we'll get to what I was doing there because that will be something that I have to do. So right now I have an ascender height up here. And I have a descender height, which is going to be a little bit less than that. So I'm going to see what happens here. I'm just going to actually triple check too while we're at it. So my ascender height is 800, cap height is 700. The descender is negative 200. Now if I was going to keep this the same as the ascender, I'd probably be going at like maybe even negative 300 if I'm doing my math right. But in this case, I think I might just leave it like this and see where we end up. So I'm going to remove this small stub here because I do want to keep the overshoot. And as you probably noticed, we have a lowercase p. So I'm just going to bump this into place and make sure I get in the habit of grabbing both outlines here. There we go. And I've mentioned this before in other places that we've got some line weight to deal with here. And one of the things I'm going to back up real quick and mention, you probably watch me do, is I'm using two different side bearings as well here. So I've been using 80 on each side for things like the H, where we've got these vertical endings or sides here. And then on the O, I'd been using 60 because those have curved. So as you can imagine, the P here is going to get 60 on the right side because we've got the O shape, the curve shape, and then obviously 80 for the other for the straight line. Okay, so with that out of the way, one of the things that we're going to have to keep an eye on here is, and this is where you really start to see this weight add up. If we look at, we'll just pull out the ruler here. So we've got about 70 points here at this junction. We've got 85 here, which actually should mirror there. It does. But one of the things you'll notice here, and I don't know if this is going to cooperate with me, maybe it won't, but you've got about 38, 49, and 87, and your eye kind of adds all of this up in this space here. Actually, does that add up to 200? Is that? I think that might be adding up to about 200. So you've gone from 70 points, or even 85 if you want to be generous, to like almost 200 points of just space there, and we really want to avoid that. Now, I'm not necessarily going to go down to 85 or 70 points. I'm not going to rule it out either, but one of the things, similar to what we did in some of the other letters here, is we've definitely got to go through and tame that down a little bit. So I'm mostly going to be working with the outer shape of this. And effectively, I guess this is how I've always viewed it, is it's almost like taking this and making it like a 3D kind of perspective to it. But you'll see right away, it's definitely helped this space out a little bit. So if I jump in, I'm getting down to 57 here, but we're also, we're making things seem or feel just a little bit thinner. Now, I know I've got a lot of stuff going on, and I should add as well that I have seen people on the inner bowl here actually indent the stem to help things out a little bit, where, you know, people might move it over and then do something like, well, make a couple extra points here to help me out, but there's a couple tricks like that where, and I'm exaggerating this a little bit, but you see how it almost feels like it kind of curves in. That's certainly an option as well, something that I might not even rule out here. I'm not going to do it to the extreme that I just pointed out, but I think I may leave this in as just an overshoot just to kind of help your eye out a little bit. But immediately you can see how that, just making these few small changes here really just makes that piece stand out. And it looks like it's got a decent amount of weight to it. The other thing that I'm probably going to be looking at here, and this is going to be a point of contention for me, but you'll notice on the H that I do taper in a little bit more versus the P where I don't. I'm eventually going to be picking between one of these two because I do want this to be consistent. I will have to decide which one I like a little bit more. I might be making my decision quicker than I thought. But what I'm looking for here is just a way to make things look consistent and make things look just the way they should. And I'm running into my fun there with the anchor points. I'm kind of thinking though, and I'm probably just going to leave this alone for now because Glyphs is being cranky. I'm probably going to aim in towards how this P tapers here. I really like how that looks versus the H where it does feel like it gets a little bit thin. So as you can imagine, we need a Q. And probably to no surprise, we're just mirroring things there. Now, one of the things I'm keeping in mind too on the Q is that I would start here, go down. So I've got that vertical stroke there, come back up, and then this comes down again, similar to how this, I'm more or less mirroring how I would write these two letters. So 85 and 85, I think those are good places. I also don't mind that the Q has the tail just as it is here, I think that's totally fine. So we're just going to keep moving forward here, and it's really not going to be any surprise probably at what I'm doing here for the different shapes. Make sure I grab the right letter that I want. We'll just write out Bob there because that's good enough for me. And I'm just making sure that my overshoots are lining up here. And then the one change that we're going to make for the B is just move my ascender height up there. I think I'm still okay with how this is looking in terms of the stroke coming down and that wrapping around. And as I keep an eye down here, it doesn't look terrible. And then last but not least, put that D in there as well. And then what I'm going to do is go back and just make sure I have my side bearings correct. So just making sure that we've got 60 on the curved side and 80 on the straight side of each of these shapes. And as you can kind of see already, I mean, I know at some point we'll get to kerning, and that's everyone's favorite topic, I know. But just with simple side bearings, I know that if I were to do something with, for example, an L and a T, obviously I need to do some kerning here. There's nothing that side bearings are going to do to help me out with that wouldn't set off a chain reaction to, on everything else. But one thing that really goes far, if you take away one small thing from this whole series, is how much side bearings can help you out. So really, when we do get to kerning, which I promise it'll happen, we won't be having to do every single combination and go blind doing it. This helps us out because already we have a lot of this set up. We can make sure that our side bearings are giving us a good flow, and then from there go and kern. And it actually saves a lot of work for us. So you can kind of see how exciting that is. Now, one other one that I'm going to jump in on as well, that you probably guessed was going to be pretty close to all of this, is the the G. And I'm going to be basing this obviously off the Q once I make sure. Let's see, we'll do GGQ. And I know that all looks like Q's because it is, but I promise one of these is a G. Now, one thing with the G that I have to determine here is I'm going to be making this a rounded bottom. And the other thing that I know is that I'm going to need to set this up so that I have a little bit of overshoot on my descender. And just to give us a little bit of a reminder here, that was at 15 points. So this outer curve has to come down. It has to come down 15 points from this lower line, and then I'm going to have it come back up, and we'll aim for this spot here. Now, I think what I'm going to do for this is I've got to figure out, I don't want to make this two shapes necessarily, but I think I'm going to start there anyway. So I'm just going to kind of push a few points. Once I get going here, there we go. I'm just going to push a few points into place where I might want them. And immediately it's going to yell at me for going the wrong way. That's okay. But we'll get this kind of lined up here. And I really, at some point, I will merge these shapes together. Also going to go through and make these a rounder shape. We'll kind of push these so that they're also in line with each other. I'm creating 90-degree angles. And then last, I'm just going to make a copy and move the top part down if it'll let me. But this makes it a little bit easier for me. I'm going to just go ahead and move these so that they line up with this. And then because this is round, we're going to grab all 4 of the points that I just put there, and I'm going to move that back 15 points as well. So we can take that, move it out of the way. And now one trick that I usually go for here is I do my best to not put points in the middle here. And instead what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line my nodes up here. And I'm probably going to push them pretty close. There's a decent chance this top row of points that I made, both here and on the other side, there's a chance that I may opt to remove these. But for now, I'm just going to leave them where they're at. I'm going to go ahead, we're going to line everybody up. That's looking pretty good. And so my first focus here is just getting these 2 points to snap together, which maybe they will, maybe they won't. So I need that point to go there. Is it going to stick with me the whole way? Oh, it is. Sometimes, as you probably saw there, they tend to get a little bit cranky. But there we go. So now each of my points are lined up. And what this allows me to do is I can grab these points. Actually, one thing I'm going to also do before we get too far, that 15 points of undershoot that I was talking about, we're just going to go ahead and I'm going to create that as a marker there. So we're going to aim for that, and I'm going to take this, pull it all the way down. So that gets us our 15 points of overshoot. Now the next thing that we need to take care of is making this 70 points tall. And I think for something like that, we're just going to aim for there. And same thing. So there we go. Now, there's a lot of work to be done here. I'm not going to pretend like what I just did was perfect, because it isn't. But what I'm going to do right away is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to merge those two shapes together already, because on this side I can see that I'm just going to need that space. And I think I went up 5, so this gets into what we've been talking about before, where we've now got to get some smoother curves and really think about how somebody would sit down and draw this G if they were going to replicate it. And really this just comes down to a little bit of trial and error. But I think we can get this pretty darn close. Again, just making sure that ultimately it's just coming down to things looking right, which I realize is not exact science or anything like that, and you may see me using the undo button here frequent amount, but really this just comes down to how would you draw this G, and then doing your best to mimic that in the shape. So I'm just going to put my little test piece back here. And we'll just see where this kind of falls. So I think I'm probably going to be making this just a little bit thicker than it needs to be. But for the time being, I'm also going to kind of own that too. I'm going to do my best to be okay with that. So, I mean, well, already what I'm looking at here is I do like how this curves down a little bit more. And this just may be a situation where I've just got to go back and forth a little bit. Now, the aperture here is a little bit on the closed side, and I don't think that's going to work very well for a text face, which is what we're after. But I think, at least for the sake of where we're at here, I think I can at least kind of get something close. And then eventually we'll probably come back and tighten all this up a little bit more. I'm actually going to just grab this whole thing here. So that gets us, I think, looking all right on the outer curve. I'm actually going to leave that square there as well. I'm going to just jump in. So now we got to get that weight back on this side and just make sure that I've got a good transition there, which I think that's going to help things out a little bit. One other thing that I'm kind of noticing here, and this just might be a game of balance a little bit, but I just want to make sure as I'm coming back up this way that things look pretty even as well. So that's doing okay. It could use some work still. Not gonna try and beat around the bush on that too much, but that seems okay for now. This gets us our G, and similar to a lot of other things, could play around with it a lot. But we can start to write out a few words with that. So already you can kind of see that's probably not going to be my best friend. It is definitely a tight squeeze there. No pun intended, because I'm writing about a hug there. But so a couple ways that I could deal with this is I could have this end perhaps at like a 45-degree angle, which I'm not really opposed to, but I could have it come down somewhere, let's say around there. That could open things up a little bit. My fear, though, is that it's going to look a little bit lopsided, because the stroke here is just going to feel like it isn't being completed or something like that. I suppose another option I could consider is breaking my own rules that I've already so carefully established and just bringing things down like that. That's one other way. And maybe that's okay that does that. This is something that I'm probably going to have to think about a little bit, but like these are some of the decisions. Just you go back and forth. Does it work? Does it not? The other thing that I'm going to do as well is just bump the bottom of this in a little bit more and making sure that I'm grabbing all the correct points that I want. Just kind of bringing that down a little bit too. I think I still have a little bit of weight issues here. So it does go a little bit farther than the overshoot that I was planning for, and if I even just did, let's go with GP, for example, there is a bit of a discrepancy there. I could be okay with that just because the lowercase g is a little bit more unique in that regard. We'll see where this ends up. I do know that my lowercase j is probably not going to go that far down either. So this just comes down to a point of, am I okay with having that way or not? There are other options. I could, actually just going back here real quick, I could go and make the upper portion of this a little bit smaller. I'm not exactly sure that I want to go down that route though. I do like how that fits in if we pull in some of the similar letters that we've done, the GDP, QB. I do like how this feels, and that we've got some consistency there in that shape. So I really think I've got to figure out if this tail of the G, lowercase g, is going to work for me, or if I need to explore a different option. One other thing that I had been considering, which I may even throw in as an alternate later on down the road, was doing a 2-story G. I know those are a little bit more popular with serif typefaces, but that could certainly be something that is worth considering here as well. So with that, I'm going to triple check my side bearings, make sure those look good. And it appears that we're in a good shape there. But really my goal here is to start writing out words and really start getting things into sentences and structures and that kind of nature, because that's really going to start telling us if we're on the right path with some of these letters. If I just look at it in this screen, I really do think they look okay. There's nothing that really jumps out or looks too out of place in this case, but it's something that isn't always obvious when you're just looking at the alphabet. So with that, if you enjoy these videos, I am planning on putting these out once every Friday. And if you want to make sure that you are keeping track of when those come out, there's a few different ways you can do that. Number one, the best way is to subscribe to my channel and hit that like button. Another way is through my website at nis.bet. I have a newsletter that goes out every Friday. I've been doing it for the last couple of years, and we have a blast on there, but I'm always making a note of when these new videos are coming out. And last but not least, if you have any input, if you have any thoughts, comments, or anything of that nature that you would like to share, I always appreciate your comments in the comment section below. As I've said before in other episodes, I'm really looking to use this channel as a way not only for me to grow, but for others who are looking to get into type design or even just up their game in type design, to give them a place where they can learn some new tips and tricks as well. So as always, thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next episode.